everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. Here is my audience. Today, I will be discussing the importance of raising minimum wage. So, right now in the state of Iowa, minimum wage is $7.25. So, I'm sure, when you think of minimum wage and who makes it, you think of high school students. But there are also adults that are trying to provide for their families that make a minimum wage. So, according to US Money Blog, things like books and a night out to movies become a luxury to those people. And last year, the price of movie tickets reached the all-time high, with the tickets costing on average $8.38, and premium 3D or IMAX tickets cost an additional $3 to $5, reaching as high as $15 in cities like New York. Prices of books have also continued to increase each year. So how is $7.25 supposed to provide for anyone when you think of it like that? So you can compare it to our gas prices right now. So currently, the average price of gas in the United States is $4.35, I'm pretty sure. So if you're making $7.25 for minimum wage and then gas is more than half of what you're making, it doesn't add up. So you can barely afford gas while making minimum wage. But while making minimum wage, you can afford things such as hot Cheetos and juice boxes. And that's about it. Funny, but not funny. So as someone who makes barely over the minimum wage at my job, I know that there's times where I don't even have money. So I can't even imagine what people who make minimum wage go through, and they have to pay more bills than what I do. Because if I struggle making more than what they do, then I can only imagine what it's like trying to provide for a family as well. So now let's start discussing how raising minimum wage is actually good for the economy. So raising minimum wage can do a lot for our economy. So if the United States raises minimum wage to $15, it would actually be good for us. So in an article by Annie Fadley, she states that increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 by 2025 will do a lot of good. It'll lift 900,000 people out of poverty, raise income for 17 million people to the tune of $509 billion over 10 years, and potentially increase wages for another 10 million people who currently make close to $15. So federal minimum wage actually has not been raised in over a decade, and so I think it's well overdue. So while minimum wage has stayed the same, the cost of living has gone up. So how are you supposed to stay at $7.25 while the cost of living goes up? It just doesn't equal out. So I feel if the cost of living goes up, your wage should go up too, because how are you supposed to balance everything? If things get more expensive, how are you going to be able to pay for it if your minimum wage is still $7.25? So according to an article by Economic Policy Institute, the wage of 2021 is an important step towards reversing the erosion of minimum wages buying power and, as detailed later, achieving greater racial and gender pay equity, as well as fairer wages for those workers who are most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that little act has three key components. It has minimum wage has to increase throughout over 5 years. So then that means by 2025, minimum wage would be $15 essentially. So if it starts out now at $9.50, it can end at $15. So then after that, minimum wage would start increasing with the economy. So if it reaches 15, and then the third component is in order for this to work is the sub-minimum wages employers are currently allowed to pay tipped workers, workers with disabilities, and workers under the age of 20 are gradually phased out, raising minimum wages for these workers to the same level as other workers. So not only does it help with our economy, it'll also help struggling families. So like I said, like minimum wage workers aren't just high schoolers. It's also people who are trying to provide for their families. So if you're making 725, you're obviously going to be struggling to pay your bills, struggling to support your family, and struggling to like secure housing. So minimum wage does not equal living wage, if that makes sense to you guys. So it should be common sense to raise minimum wage while the cost of living rises too. So if prices raise, then your salaries need to rise too to keep up with inflation. And according to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he said, by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of decent living. So today, that definitely does not add up. So full-time employees who earn a minimum wage on average make like $15,000 if they work like 40 hours a week. So the poverty line is actually like 18,000 and some dollars. So that's actually under the poverty line, which is crazy that minimum wage is like that. So another like factor that goes into it is also the companies. So companies won't give minimum wage workers the schedules that they ask for. So that means like, for example, like they'll have them close one night and then open the next morning. So it really doesn't leave a lot of room for like getting a second job, going to school to get a better job, childcare, stuff like that. So it doesn't add up. So if your job doesn't provide it, your salary needs to provide it. And minimum wage employees are super vulnerable to be getting cheated out of pay too. So to wrap this all up, basically minimum wage needs to be raised to at least $15 if the cost of living keeps rising too.